Order. Question number 3, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, why did he accept the resignation of the Honourable John Banks as a Minister on 16 October 2013?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, because I agreed with the Honourable John Banks that the court case would be a distraction for the government if he was to continue as a Minister.
So wasn't he did anything wrong?
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Does he stand by his statement that, quote, to make a contribution you have to have integrity, and to have integrity there has to be a directness and fullness in your answers, and if so, how did John Banks meet that test?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, in answer to the first part of the question, yes.
He doesn't want to say.
Supplementary question, Honourable David
Mr Speaker,
Cunliffe.
why did the Prime Minister refuse to even read the police report when Mr Banks had taken a helicopter ride to the most expensive mansion in his own electorate to meet with a nearly 7-foot-tall German whose wife he described as the most beautiful woman in the world, and from whom he solicited donations, which he then said he had mysteriously forgotten?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I think it's worth recalling the situation. The police looked at it, decided there was no case to answer to. I accepted the member at his word, and I continue to accept him at his word.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Will he now tell New Zealand the reasons for Richard Worth's resignation, which he has hitherto refused to give?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no.
Mr Speaker.
Right,
Will
the Honourable David Cunliffe, supplementary
Will he
question.
reinstate the Honourable John Banks as a Minister in his government if he is cleared of the charges he is currently facing in court?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
Will he reinstate the Honourable Peter Dunn as a Minister in his government if he's cleared by the Privileges Committee inquiry?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, quite possibly.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Has the Prime Minister received any advice on the viability of his government's proposed RMA reforms should the Maori Party and Peter Dunn not support them?
Order. No, I'm sorry, I do have to, looking at that question, it is not in any way related to the original primary. I'll allow the member another question.
I may amend it
David
slightly,
Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker. Has the Prime Minister received any advice on the viability of the government's proposed RMA reforms?
Order.
Should the Honourable John Banks not be available to vote for it and the Maori Party and Peter Dunn not support it?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, firstly, Mr Banks is quite able to vote, as he'll be voting on other things that we've been indicated. Secondly, we are a minority government, and like any minority government, we need to work to build a majority as we go along. We're in discussions with our partners about whether we can get support for the RMA legislation. We might possibly be able to do that.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Does the Prime Minister now face, and I quote, the prospect of being held to ransom by potentially unreliable political allies as each attempts to extract their pound of flesh from the new dynamic? Close quote, a quote from his good self.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, we are a minority government, and so when we go to... Well, it's actually not changing, funnily enough, but we are a minority government, and as we go about our desire to pass legislation, we have to build a parliamentary majority. But if anyone's going to be held to ransom, it could easily be by David Cunliffe by the Greens, who are clearly opposed to the Sky City deal, even if Labor are now not opposed to the Sky City deal.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether he received written advice from John Banks while John Banks was still a Minister of his government concerning a conflict of interest over the New Zealand International Convention Centre Bill and the fact that Sky City's CEO, Nigel Morrison, was to give evidence affecting him in court? If not, does he believe that a conflict of interest exists?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I'd need to check that, but conflicts of interest are generally managed by the Cabinet Office, so I need to check whether they have anything.
Question number 4, Colin King.
Thank you.